Hello everyone! Today we are talking about word counts. How long should your novel be, and does what you have qualify as a novel? What are the word counts that are going to be a red flag for agents when you query either too short or too long? Generally speaking, I can tell you what's definitely too short and what's definitely too long, though the rules vary by whether you're a debut author or an established author and what genre you're writing in. My expertise is in young adult fiction, so a lot of the word count targets I'm going to be discussing are for YA. But I'm going to link to some handy posts down in the description that have a primer for word counts for additional genres. But it's easy to tell you what's definitely too short to be a novel, no matter the genre you're working in, unless it's picture books. If your work of fiction is less than 30,000 words, you've written either a short story or a novella. There might be some exceptions for chapter books, but middle grade is a whole other area. You might be able to get away with a 40K novel, but more often than not, you need to be targeting at least 50,000 words. That said, while 50,000 words is considered a novel, as far as NaNoWriMo is concerned, that's National Novel Writing Month in November, the goal that you have to hit there is 50K. But in most cases, 50K just isn't going to be a novel. Most novels are definitely longer. Now, what's too long? It's hard to qualify this because you're always going to find an exception, and the author's name is likely going to be George R.R. Martin. But typically, if your book is over, say, 180K or 200K, your book is too long. And if you're a debut author, if your book's over 100K, you're going to experience problems in the querying process. A book over 100K tends to be a red flag for agents. We can debate all day about how right or wrong that is, but it's just a reality of the industry. For a debut author, anything over 100K is going to be a harder sell. Not an impossible sell, but definitely harder. The most you can get away with is maybe 120K. Don't query anything over that, you're likely to be an auto-reject for a lot of agents. Now, of course, when you're no longer a debut author and you're established, you can write books longer than this. I mean, look at a Cassie Clare novel. They are all longer than 100,000 words. And as I mentioned, there's always George R.R. Martin. The thing is, you have to earn these kinds of word counts. Because frankly, longer books are more expensive to print. A publisher has to consider things like the number of pages and binding costs. Bigger books are more expensive. The sweet spot is going to be 80K to 120K max. You might be the exception, but typically it's safer to aim for the middle. Let's dig into genre with a particular focus on YA. Typically, contemporary novels are a lot shorter. This is where you could write anything between 40 and 70K and have no problems. And in fact, 70K is a little bit high for a YA contemporary. Your sweet spot is 50 to 65K. However, if you're writing science fiction and fantasy, you're going to want to aim for 70K to 90K. And as I mentioned, try not to go over 100K, but the max for a sci-fi or fantasy YA debut would be around 120K. I'll tell you a personal story. My second book was queried at 110K. There might be a lot of different reasons that book didn't do quite as well in queries, but I believe that the word count didn't help it. So for my third book, while I finished a draft at 104K, I shaved about 5,000 words off and I queried that sucker at 99,700 words. It made a difference. Get that sucker under 100K, guys. It'll help you when you query. The reason science fiction and fantasy novels tend to be longer is there's a lot more world building work that needs to be done. It doesn't take place in our world, so certain things can't be taken for granted. You have to spend time introducing the world and how it works. There also tend to be more fun and games and adventures in science fiction and fantasy, so readers of those genres expect a little more bulk. If your science fiction or fantasy novel isn't at least 70K, an agent is going to assume you haven't done the groundwork for your world building and your characters that is expected in the genre. But if you go over that magical 100K, the agent is going to think that you're not good at editing. It's a double-edged sword, so I advise authors to stick for the middle, aim for a 90K draft. What I said about YA word counts does apply outside of YA. Just YA is my expertise, so I feel more comfortable stating definitively word counts for those books. But generally, if you've written suspense, mystery, thriller, a literary novel, just like with YA contemporary, you're going to want to aim for the sweet spot of 50 to 70K. And if you're writing science fiction and fantasy outside of YA, again, think about 70 to 90K. Though in fantasy, longer books are more accepted. As a debut, you still want to try to be under 100K, but in fantasy, books are usually over 100K. As I said, it's a fine line to walk. You want to query as a debut with a slightly shorter book so that you can show to agents that you are able to craft concisely and edit yourself. But you don't want to be so short that you're skimping on the genre conventions. So bear in mind word count targets when you're drafting, revising, and before you query. Check the posts I'm going to link in the description just to double check that you're hitting the targets for your chosen genre. I know you can come at me in the comments with all sorts of unicorns, and I already mentioned some of them, like Cassandra Clare and George R.R. Martin. But the thing about unicorns is that they're unicorns. The average aspiring author, especially trying to debut, needs to stick to word count conventions. I hope this helped clear up what I've seen as a frequently asked question. Happy writing and querying, everyone!